it is some serious cash people can save. Is this what's kind of driving people the most to make these energy efficient investments?
I think it's important to note that everyone will go through this kind of energy transition at a different time and a different ability.
They're also more willing to sacrifice comfort to cut energy use.
When it comes to the cost of living crisis, our homes are our biggest expense. From mortgage or rent payment to bills and maintenance, it really all adds up. So the question begs, how are we powering our homes, and how can those choices affect not only our back pocket but our environment? And are Aussies switched on to optimising their homes? Here with me to chat through the 2025 PropTrack Origin Australian Home Energy Report is Eleanor Cray, Senior Economist at REA Group and author of the report, as well as Catherine Anderson, General Manager of Marketing at Origin Energy. Thank you so much for coming on the show, both. I'm excited to break down this report around energy efficiency, which is all about how you can power your home in the best possible way from a cost and environment point of view. Kat, did I get that right? What does energy efficiency actually mean?
Yeah, you're right. It's literally around how can you make your home and your appliances work smarter. So getting all the same stuff done, but ideally with less energy intensity. You could probably think about it in two ways, right? So you can think about getting the most energy efficient appliances that you can get within your budget. But then aside from that as well, it's kind of about your behaviour and how you use your energy at home. So a great example, if you have solar, running appliances when the sun's shining, that's super energy efficient for you in your house compared to running them at night, for example. So it's really about your home and your appliances and you and how that works.
Eleanor, how many survey respondents actually had an understanding of the term energy efficiency and then all the terms that surround it?
So it's a really interesting question. And, this year's results really show a bit of a mixed picture. So whilst there is some awareness of some of those key energy related terms, 2 in 5 Aussies still don't actually know how to improve their home's energy efficiency. Only 34% of respondents actually said they have a good understanding of terms like electrification. And it's really just over half that report that they have a good understanding of terms like energy efficiency and renewable energy. And when we break that down across the different subsections or different demographic groups, for younger Australians under 35, those figures are even lower. So there's really a bit of a knowledge gap here that we've identified, and that's probably likely to be holding people back from making these key decisions. So we know that understanding is really a precursor to action.
Did it say where the lack of understanding was coming from?
So a big part of it really comes down to cost perceptions, I think. So a lot of people really see energy efficient upgrades, things like induction cooktops or heat pumps and the like as expensive without recognizing those long-term savings. And that could be driving some of the confusion in terms of there being confusion as well around available rebates or technologies. And without a strong grasp of the financial and the environmental benefits, it's really easy for households to delay action and delay educating or upskilling themselves in terms of understanding those key terms.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's also about understanding how those upfront costs then add into the long-term savings. Kat, what are your thoughts on this? Because what impact do you think that this lack of understanding, in Aussie homes, could actually have on the environment?
Well, I think it's exactly as Eleanor was saying. If you don't understand something, it's really hard to know.
Oh, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. And you can imply that to anything. But I think particularly energy itself is complicated to start with, let alone then thinking about what might be the next best step for your house. And so I think bridging that gap for households with education is so important, because ultimately if households can start making even really simple changes, A, they can capture the savings, as you said, and then B, there's this opportunity to have really great sustainability outcomes as well. And so education is so important, podcasts like this, and getting that information into people's hands in a really palatable way, because we're sort of starting to talk about the differences in generations as well. And so podcast is a great example, blog posts, content, calculators. And so I think, energy retailers like Origin sort of see our role as really important in helping get that information out to our customers.
Yeah, I think that's such a valid point in like you meet the customer where they're at.
Yeah.
So depending on what content medium they're most consuming, it does make sense to then go and play in that space.
Yep.
But if we put Australia on a global stage, how do our homes compare to the world around us? Because all the things that, well, the way I see it is all the things we're trying to get Australian homes to do, it is being done around the world already. We're not reinventing the wheel here.
Yeah, pretty much. And I mean, maybe positively for Australia, like we have the highest uptake of rooftop solar. So I think it's almost 40% of homes.
In the world.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense for our environment. But you're right. If you look at, say, Europe and you look at the way they're building homes to be much more energy efficient, I think Australia does lag a little bit there. And I read it once that our homes are kind of described as quite leaky. And so they're really drafty. And if you live in an old home or you've rented an old home or apartment, like what that feels like. And I think it's only been quite recently, maybe 2010, where the building code changed and 6-star energy for new builds was really important. But we've all lived in those old homes, right? And you know what that's like.
I probably can guess the answer to my next question then. Is it the old homes that are dragging us down? Because new builds obviously do have regulations. You just hit it on the head that they have to meet. So is it those period homes, the early 1900s, those heritage homes that I absolutely love to look at, but the livability is a bit sucks?
Yeah. And I think it's just, the windows weren't double glazed, the homes are aging. And so it's really on, I guess, homeowners or landlords to be thinking about that energy efficiency journey. And there's heaps of there's upfront costs involved. So those homes are on a journey. Like I'm really confident they can get there, but it's a journey for the older homes. And I think for new homes, we just hope that like building code and architecture and all that keeps up at the forefront of efficiency.
So on the cost side of things, do you have any figures about how much somebody could save if they did optimise their home?
Yeah, so I think sort of for solar, we typically would say, around $1,000, $1,200 a year saving for solar panels. But I guess an emerging trend now is this idea of like an electrified home. So, a house like that would typically have solar panels on the roof, battery, probably an EV in the driveway as well.
And would we call that an electrified home? Yeah,
so that would be a home that doesn't have a gas connection. It would be sort of solar panels, battery, EV. And for a house like that, we could say it could be up to like $4,000 a year
on
savings.
top of that $1,200?
Including the solar.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So you kind of have these homes moving through the transition.
Yeah.
But it is important to note, like there's upfront costs with all these things, right? So I don't want to leave off anyone that isn't able or up to that point. And so, we still try to talk to our customers about, hey, really simple things like turning appliances off at the wall when you're not using them. It's $100 a year of savings, and it may not seem as much compared to when you've got a battery and solar panels, but there's no cost in the way there. So there are kind of small tips and tricks that we do try to help people with because I think it's important to note that everyone will go through this kind of energy transition at a different time and a different ability, and we don't want anyone left behind. So you got to think about the whole kind of stretch there.
Eleanor, it is some serious cash people can save. Is this what's kind of driving people the most to make these energy efficient investments?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Certainly saving money really came out as, I guess, the biggest motivator across survey respondents. It's not surprising. We know that cost of living pressures are really front of mind in today's economic climate. And our report found that it is around 68% of respondents that said their primary reason for making energy upgrades is to reduce their bills. And that actually gets even higher. So it's around 71% when we look at that 35 to 64-year-old age group. Environmental benefits also do matter, but saving money is really the standout driver.
Okay, so does the report also show that homeowners are beginning to make these investments and changing their homes? Like obviously the driver, a lot of it is cash, but what are they doing to save that?
Yeah, I mean, despite that kind of lack of understanding that we see with around 40% of respondents, there's definitely momentum to make changes. We're seeing already that around 70% of survey respondents have already changed their energy habits due to the energy crisis, although that does mostly include kind of simple shifts like turning off the lights, turning off appliances. Although encouragingly, when we look at what people are looking to invest in the future over the next 5 years, it's around 56% of people that said they are planning those bigger home upgrades over the next 5 years and are planning to spend at least something. And that's certainly encouraging to see. Now, that's especially the case amongst those who already own their own home. That's not really such a surprise that they're the ones that are thinking most about those future upgrades, but they're also the ones that are thinking about the value that energy efficient upgrades can add to a home, with many respondents also citing that they would pay more for a home with energy efficient features. So again, those homeowners and those looking to sell in the next year or so also really valuing those energy efficient upgrades. I think the report also makes it really clear that understanding is that really powerful enabler of action. So those who reported a good grasp of all those energy related terms we talked about are significantly more likely to have made home upgrades already, shifted their energy behaviours, and to be planning further improvements in the future, whilst in contrast, it's around 3 in 4 of those with no understanding of the term energy efficiency that have no plans to make changes.
What's the difference around the country, Eleanor? Are some states adopting, energy efficient things, I guess, like solar more than others?
Yeah, again, it's interesting because there is a bit of a state-by-state breakdown and variance. So when we look at things like solar, respondents in New South Wales and Victoria are much less likely to have solar than those in Queensland, Western Australia and South Australia. I mean, it makes sense. That's likely due to less average hours of sunshine, slightly different housing types, but also policy incentives and grid factors do play a role. Interestingly, again, there is a bit of a split when we look at regional versus metro as well. So looking at regional Australia versus capital city counterparts, on the whole, regional respondents are much more likely to install solar panels. That's again likely due to grid factors like electricity costs and also things like available space and maybe a greater need for that energy independence with some less reliable grid infrastructure in some regional areas.
I'm really interested in the discrepancy in how different generations feel about improving home efficiency and kind of what Eleanor spoke about it at the beginning of the episode, what different age brackets, understood and didn't understand. How are the different age brackets feeling about energy?
I don't know that it's necessarily a reflection of age and that we can kind of group generations. I think it's sort of what Eleanor was alluding to around, it's kind of related to home ownership, right? So we saw over 35s like much more inclined to be making change, planning for change, wanting to think about these things, and primarily driven by wanting to bring down household bills. But I don't think we can say that under 35s don't care about those things. And I think they definitely showed a concern for sustainability and environmental outcomes. But I think when you're in that younger age bracket, you've got less means to do it. You may not be owning your own home yet. So I think as people move through those kind of phases of life, it changes what's actually available to you. And so I think there's an interesting thing there around like the number of people who are renting and the engagement and ability they have. And again, that's why I think we're always really careful to be talking about a whole gamut of things that you can do around energy efficiency, and equally a whole heap of different ways to reach people. I think that's incredibly important.
Apart from reducing the bills, Eleanor, what do we know about what's driving different people's attitudes?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, older Australians definitely tend to lead when it comes to action. We saw that quite clearly in the survey results in terms of they're more likely to have already made upgrades, more likely to have solar, for example. And I think a lot of that comes down to, as Kat was saying, that home ownership piece, but also those financial motivations around reducing costs and bills. Younger Australians, on the other hand, report much higher levels of climate anxiety. Around 47%, of those under 35 say they've experienced climate anxiety. They're also more willing to sacrifice comfort to cut energy use. But I think, again, when we're looking at that younger cohort, again, many younger Australians are renters, and renters are also citing that it's that lack of control and lack of awareness around available support that are really holding them back from making these energy efficient upgrades. So it's not that the people don't care or younger Australians don't care, they certainly do, but it's probably that affordability and access piece that are the real issues. So they've got lower budgets and they've got less autonomy.
When you say sacrificing comfort, is that meaning they're simply not turning on their, say, heating and they will put on a jumper instead?
Yeah, so when we're looking at a question like that, we're looking at sacrifices that people have made in order to reduce their home energy use. So certainly that would be an example of one of the sacrifices that someone could make in order to reduce energy usage.
On the topic of climate anxiety, I actually hadn't heard that term before until I read this year's report. Kat, what does it mean?
And I'm a bit the same, actually. It's sort of a new term for me, but I think it really kind of encompasses this idea of like fear and worry about the future. And I think as people are seeing or experiencing changing climates, it's about, that fear of like, well, what will the future hold? And I think Eleanor kind of was really right in that area of like people can feel quite out of control. And so I do feel like we've touched across it a few times in this conversation around how do we get education and information to people just so that they can feel a little bit more in control of, well, what would the next step be and what action can I take? And I think that will, somewhat help, but it's a pretty complicated, challenging space and experience for people.
Kat, what types of education would you like to see out there that you think might cut through a bit more than what is currently on market?
It's interesting. And I think at Origin, we've tried to really change up our approach to education. I think we used to, think about really like long form content, but then recently it's been actually about our podcast. It's about engaging content creators and working with them through TikTok to try and reach younger Australians. And so I think it is this acknowledgement that education is going to need to seep through and it's going to have to be a bit of a two-way conversation as well. Interestingly, we saw when the government announced a battery rebate, we see immediate increase in inquiries. And so also making sure that consumers feel confident, in the case of us, to be able to reach out and trust the advice that they're getting from their energy retailer as well. So it's not a one-way conversation. It's really two-way. All of these decisions are pretty personalised based on someone's, financial position, the type of house they're in, what they're thinking about for the long term. So it's all in now. And so this is kind of now how energy is moving.
The report found that going all electric in the home, which basically means it's a home that has no reliance on gas, it could save you literally hundreds of dollars per year. And that combined with solar and a battery could then save you more, as we discussed before. Is this a trend that you're seeing pick up steam?
Yeah, it is. And I think, we spoke earlier about building codes. So we're seeing builders and architects really sort of leading the way. And then for households now that they're able to, get online, get quotes and understand what that journey could look like for them, I think it's sort of demystifying it a bit. And it's not, it's not this far away frontier. It's here now. All electric houses are here now. And the benefits are really there for consumers. It brings down their bills, but it also reduces their house's environmental footprint, right? So there's so many positives to it. It feels less complicated because it is now, you've got government rebates, there's education, you can jump online and get no commitment quotes. There's all of this stuff out there that can help people take that first step. And like we mentioned before, when you can take the first step, you can then start getting savings and you're in the journey. So is all electric homes a trend? I think it's just where we're at now in our energy transition, when solar's now at 40% and now we can kind of grab the benefits of those solar panels and help a house really integrate their energy usage. So I think it's here.
For those who don't live in an all-electric house, you and I chatted before this podcast and what we said was that things don't need to be hard. It's things like maybe a door snake that will cost you south of $10. What are your tips to buyers and renters who actually are looking to make that first step?
I've got these 3 door snakes at my house that work super hard in my very all-electric house. So I definitely feel that my advice is like just take it easy. Like, this is a really long process. If you're in an older home like I am, you've got to break it up into pieces. And so you actually have to say, okay, what can I put in place now that will make a really substantial difference? And so for me, that's door snakes, or that's thinking about what the thermostat is set to.
Mm-hmm.
Then from there, it might be thinking about things that may have some additional cost involved. So double glazing windows, solar panels. So my advice is just to take it easy, get some great advice, and realize that you are on a bit of a journey.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it doesn't have to all happen instantly, but it is certainly an area that's wholly worthwhile. It definitely obviously needs some improvement based on the awareness and the education pieces, but it is retailers like Origin who are meeting people on TikTok, and you're meeting people on Instagram, and you're putting out this content that speaks to your desired demo, like where they're at and what they're engaging with. I've loved unpacking this report today with both of you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining me. This has been Real Talk. For your weekly fix, please follow wherever you listen to your podcasts, and tune in next time for more real questions, news and insights on the topics that matter most from realestate.com.au, Australia's #1 address in property. All information provided is general advice and opinion based on current market conditions. These opinions should not be treated as investment advice. Always obtain advice based on your individual circumstances.
Real Talk acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, air and community. We pay our respects to elders past and present.